Morning, everyone. My name is Rachel Lechuga, and I work as the communication specialist for ISAP and the outreach specialist at American Farmland Trust. Generally, I'm behind the scenes in these calls, but today it's exciting to be in front of the camera and talking to you all, welcoming you to the space. Today we have an exciting announcement. I'm really excited that we're announcing our change from the Illinois Cover Crop on Farm Network is now officially the Illinois Conservation on Farm Network. So we just dropped a C and widened it so we could have a breadth of experience and folks join the network. So although we started really primarily focusing on cover crops, our range of conservation practices, the people we've met, the ideas that we're implementing have shifted since then. And so we would just like to kind of keep opening up this network to cover a whole breadth of conservation practices on the farm. And so we're hoping to hear from more edge of field folks throughout ISAP and within our network, and folks who may be advising on crop management, grazing, a whole host of things. And so although the name is new, our monthly webinars and values and all of that remains the same. So we're still committed to bringing you the farmer-centered learning, the peer connection, relevant updates, science-backed research, and a space to connect with new folks. So thank you for joining us today. So we would like to know who's all in the room with us. So if you could go ahead and introduce yourself to the network. In the chat, you can put your name, your organization, your occupation, your location. And if you're feeling up to it, maybe one word that describes just how you're doing today, how your week's going. And while we do that, you can also answer our morning opening poll. All right, so it looks like folks are moderately familiar with best practices for good working relationships with landowners and farmers, which is great. That means that there's some room for learning here. So thank you all for responding to that. And just a reminder that our calls are uploaded onto ISAP's YouTube page, so they are recorded. You should have received a notification when you came in. And just to run through our agenda really quick, we will be having our discussion with Becky Taylor, Krista Kirkham, and Dan Schafer today, which will be a panel discussion led by Greg Goodwin. We'll follow that with an open group Q&A, and then we have some news around the network, just some happenings that you should keep on your radar for the upcoming month. And then we'll just give you a little hint at what our next call will be, and we'll close with our CEU slide. So Greg, I'm going to go ahead and pass it to you, and you can kick us off with the panel.
Sounds great. Thank you, Rachel. Pleasure of moderating the panel discussion today. Greg Goodwin with the Illinois Corn Growers Association and director of the Precision Conservation Management Program. And today have the pleasure of working with the fine folks on the call. Becky Taylor with the Livingston County Soil and Water Conservation District, Dan Schafer with the Illinois Fertilizer and Chemical Association, and Krista Kirkham with the Nature Conservancy. And so with that, maybe give them all an opportunity to introduce themselves and the kind of work they do. I will kick it over to you, Becky, to start.
Hi, everyone. I'm Becky Taylor. I'm, like it says, with the Livingston County Soil and Water Conservation District. I've been here for 9 years, and I grew up here in Livingston County, so I do think that helps me with working with the farmers. So I also have a background in education.
Over to you, Dan.
Yeah, Dan Schafer with Illinois Fertilizer and Chemical Association. Prior to joining IFCA in 2012, I worked 31 years in ag retail with Align IFS, located here in Champaign County.
Excellent. And on to you, Krista.
Yeah, good morning, everyone. I'm Krista Kirkham with the Illinois chapter of the Nature Conservancy. I have been here for 18 years on our science team as an aquatic ecologist, and I've been lucky enough to spend all of those years with our Mackinac River program. So really focusing on the headwaters of that region and working with a few producers there. So thanks for the invite. Appreciate it.
Absolutely. Thank you all. And a couple quick reminders. Just wanted to let everybody know this meeting will be recorded, so you can go back and watch it later. And to post any questions in the chat, we'll run through a few scripted questions here to kind of kick things off. But then if anybody has any follow-ups or additional questions, please put those in the chat and we will get to those in kind of the second half of the call. So with that, we will kick it off. And this essentially is meant to be working or hearing from, researchers that are kind of bridging the gap between tenant landowners or tenant farmers and landowners. And so with that, wanted to kick this question over of what are some of the best practices for working with cooperating farmers and landowners? Just advice on that for any one of you who wants to start. I'll just watch for who comes off mute first.
I can do it. I'll jump in.
Thanks, Krista.
Yeah, no problem. So I'll preface this by saying that in my work I've worked with a much smaller number of producers than Becky and Dan have, so it'd be really great to get their perspectives on this too. But yeah, I think for me over the several years was and so if my role is taking water samples on people's property, and of course asking those permissions, and then sometimes you're working with landowners, sometimes it's the tenant, sometimes it's a farm manager, so multiple people to try to figure out who is your main point of contact. But I feel like over those years it was not only earning that trust of being able to come out to take the samples, but also in a lot of our work with getting constructed wetlands on the ground, these are very new programs, and putting water back on the landscape in places where we've been draining them. They're new concepts, and it's through farm bill programs that the landowner or tenant may not be familiar with. I've just found out that transparency and honesty and consistent communication have been by far the key things to help us move along. So just keep showing up through all those processes and being there to help answer questions. And oftentimes I don't have answers, but we're going to work together to figure it out. So, partnering a lot with your soil and water districts, like Becky's role has been critical. And also NRCS, FSA, people that really can help through that, those CRP process or EQIP or whatever program you're going through. Those really key partnerships have been really, really helpful. And yeah, just little things too, like sending handwritten notes when there's something to celebrate, or inviting people to look at some of the results you're seeing, and just being there, being open and being transparent, I think has been really the key for me. So maybe I'll punt it to Becky now.
Okay. Yeah, I think for me, part of it was, like I said in the opening, with farmers, there's sometimes that regional, I'm from Livingston County, so I grew up here. I'm not coming in from outside trying to talk to them, but also just listening to them is very important, because sometimes that's what they need, is just somebody to listen, and not just jump in and say, you need to do X, Y, and Z. It's, listening to whatever their concerns are and then working with them to figure out how to best address those concerns. And also with our Vermilion Headwaters Watershed Project, I had a farmer from that area, because we're talking the other opposite corner of the county. And anybody who's looked at Livingston County, it's pretty big. It takes me an hour to get down to the watershed. So just having somebody from that area that was able to take me around and introduce me to some of the people in the watershed to get that personal one-on-one connection with them. So that's basically it for us.
So,
Sure. Go ahead, Dan.
yeah, my background's a little bit unique, since I come from the fertilizer industry and spent over 30 years working individually with growers on putting together nutrient management plans and herbicide plans and things like that. So being able to talk to individual growers was pretty easy when it comes to helping them make decisions. But since 2012, when NREC came in, I've been tied with the research pretty tight. my mindset has been completely changed because of the NREC research that's been done over the last 12 years or so. And in saying that, when I was making recommendations in the fertilizer industry, it wasn't about cover crops. I did feel strongly about strip till and soil conservation, but I wasn't looking at the total picture and being able to incorporate cover crops into what I was my sales story basically. So now, since I've gone through all this time, especially with Lowell Gentry, and him and I passed by each other early on in my career, and his at the University of Illinois, and then we've got back together here through all this research. But following that research, my mindset is, to help folks get cover crops on the ground, help folks to get soil conservation on the ground. And that's kind of what my position has turned into with IFCA as a director of nutrient stewardship, to try to help retailers understand how to incorporate the conservation practices into their sales.
Yeah, thank you. That all makes perfect sense. And maybe a follow on to that would be, so for those who don't know, Illinois is maybe a bit unique in that we have a very high percentage of land that is not owned by the farmer. It's something between 70 and 80% when you look at it across the state. Obviously, that may have implications to the type of conservation effort that we're, thinking about, and whether that, could be purely handled by the farmer if it's in field, or if it's something that, needs to have landowner discussion if it's on the edge of the field. Maybe could each of you kind of speak to the kind of conservation efforts that you specifically work on, and how maybe that plays into the dynamic of the farmer landowner conversation, and how integrated those things are in each of your work. Kristen, you want to kick us off?
Yeah, thank you for this. A good question too, and that is something that's extremely common, particularly like you said in Illinois and in our central Illinois area where I've been working. So yeah, I think in a lot of our work, at least with the Nature Conservancy and with Lane County Soil and Water District, these were research projects that we were really focusing on some pretty small areas of the watershed. So there were definitely certain individuals that we wanted to work with, and so sometimes it's finding out who's the owner, and sometimes if the owner's out of state, okay, who's the tenant, and then maybe it's owned by a farm manager. So there's times when you could be dealing up to 3 different entities, and that can slow you down a little bit. But finding out who is really the decision maker on the property is key, and also finding out who might be open to certain conservation practices. Like I mentioned before, a lot of our research has focused on constructed wetlands, but we've also incorporated in-field practices such as cover crops. So learning a lot about cover crops also has been really helpful in trying to figure out the bundling effect of, how much less nutrients are we seeing coming off our fields by looking at our constructed wetlands, but also, adding that impact of cover crops. So I have learned a lot from working with whoever was our main point of contact. And oftentimes that is the tenant, which has been really great because they're the ones out there actually working on the ground, and ask a lot of great questions, and I learn as well. So again, it comes back to that communication piece, and always making sure everyone's on the same page. There's times where the landowner really isn't that involved, but there's times where the landowner is extremely involved. So just trying to figure out what everyone's goal is for that farm, or maybe if they're open to trying something new. That's just really been, I think, key for us. And then just maintaining that conversation piece through implementation, and then figuring out the finances behind some of these programs to make sure they're comfortable with what's going on. And then with me going out and monitoring a lot of it, they're seeing my face over and over again, because I'm the one going out there to take the samples or check on equipment or just make sure everything's going okay. So that's been huge too, is having that same face coming out over and over again. I think it's been really helpful for us.
Makes a ton of sense. Yeah, Becky, over to you. Yeah, comments on that?
Sure. We work with both tenants and landowners or farm managers. We work with the whole range. So it's pretty broad what we do here. Sometimes we're starting with the tenant, and depending on what the practice is, sometimes that's the only person we really need to work with. But if we're doing a bigger project, we'll need to bring in the landowner or the farm manager. And one way that we've tried to work out or reach out to some of those landowners, especially if you look at women landowners, is we do our women in ag meetings every year. And we try to make sure that they're educational so that if those people have questions for their tenants, and a lot of times women don't feel as comfortable, especially if they didn't have much to do with the farm to begin with. We try to make sure that we give them enough education on a bunch of different topics that they can go and then ask their tenant or ask their farmer questions, and making sure that what's happening on that land is what they want to have happen on that land. So that's one way that we try to reach out to landowners, and any of our events actually are open to everybody. So it's not just farmer focused.
Any additional perspectives there, Dan?
Yeah, one of the things that I've found early on probably was communications with both the tenant and the landowner, or at least make sure that the tenant, if this is on research projects that we're trying to set up, make sure the tenant, even if it's a cash rent lease, communicates to the landowner, because there's been instances where the landowner wasn't informed, didn't understand what was going on. We also work with farm managers too to set up trials on farm, and they do a really good job of communicating. If anybody is a little lacking in communication sometimes, is maybe the younger farmer that doesn't understand the necessity, and then he's cash renting the farm, and maybe he doesn't feel like he needs to let anybody know. And then sometimes somebody's been farming the land for 30 years, they kind of forget to let the landowner know what's going on. So I think the communication piece is very important when no matter what you're doing on the land.
Yeah, fully agree there. Krista, I think you made a comment that I think we have found through what we do with PCM very critical of continuity of staff who's working with farmers and that trust piece. I guess, would you mind expanding kind of just on your feelings on that? And then, yeah, Becky or Dan, if you have any additional thoughts there as well.
Yeah, briefly, I like what Becky mentioned. She's got that huge advantage of being from the county. People know who she is, and that trust is kind of immediately there. I didn't have that, even though I've been living in McLean County for 25 years now, but I'm not from there. And then also being from a conservation organization and not necessarily attached to ag was a hurdle to overcome as well. But I think coming forward with very honest intentions about the research question, and that putting that trust of anything we're finding, you're openly open to see, we're just looking at nitrogen, phosphorus, not anything, temperature, a lot of just hydrology and questions like that. And I think, again, it's just, it's being able to show up consistently like that, and offering, here's my phone number, you got any questions? And it's been a range of people that were open from the beginning to people that were pretty skeptical, and we kind of had to work a little bit. And again, that's where partners were so key in building that trust. But eventually, I was fortunate enough to be out there this whole time, and now if people are coming to me or just coming by to say hi and making sure I'm okay, especially you might have seen that winter picture. I do sample year round, and so there's times to make sure that people just would be like, hey, are you okay? Are you sure you want to be doing this right now? And sometimes their judgment was better than mine. And pulling me out if I get stuck. Eventually those relationships come with even anyone in the area. They just kind of are wondering what's going on. And that's kind of a powerful outreach tool as well. Even if we're not working on their property, they might be asking questions about what's happening here. So yeah, anyway, it's very, I think it just takes a lot of time, but that might be the most important thing, is just that trust and consistency. So I'm sure Dan and Becky have a similar perspective and even deeper than mine, but.
Sure. Yeah. Any additional comments there, Dan or Becky?
I can just add in our office, our NRCS, because we are co-located for everybody who doesn't realize that soil and waters quite often are co-located with NRCS. We have had a lot of turnover with our NRCS just mainly because of people just moving up in the agency or wanting to get closer to home, different things like that. So the SWCD is that constant presence. Like I said, I've been here for 9 years, so they know when they come in that I'm at least somebody that they will recognize. So that does help. And so sometimes they'll come to me first, and then I can direct them to, if they're wanting NRCS help, I can direct them to who they need to go to there. So that is one thing that I know works, is that they come in and they see me with SWCD and they know they can at least ask me the initial questions.
Yeah, starting out, to gain people's trust, I use a lot of the research data that's been generated and talk about that. But being out there, if you set up a trial and being out there on the farm and stuff, it's not a bad idea just to stop in and visit with whoever the cooperator is and let them know you were out there. They're interested in what you found too. So in that case, you talk to them a little bit and let them know you were in the field. And if you found something that they need to know about in the field, you can let them know also, kind of like a scout. But as we got trials around the state, it's important to pay attention to each one of them and treat each one as an individual and try to stay on top of everything.
No, that all makes perfect sense. Maybe to just help us understand maybe any unexpected challenges that have found in this kind of work, and maybe a bit of a expansion on that. Do you find yourselves in any kind of sticky situations with, say, landowner or tenant, with any kind of financial assistance opportunities that are coming to help fund the conservation efforts or research efforts, and how you navigate those kind of things? Yeah, Becky, let's say Becky.
I can start out on this one. We haven't here in our county, at least since I've been here, faced any of those sticky situations. But for us, I think our biggest hurdle is finding the best way to get the information out, because we have such a broad range of both producers and landowners. We do put out a print newsletter every or twice a year, because there's some people that want to see that print newsletter. But we also try to do things through like email or social media, because that's where a different group is at. So just trying to find the best way to get the information out to the most people, whether that be about programs or upcoming events or any new research that we think would be interesting. It's hard to figure out the best way to get that information out.
Yeah, that makes sense. Dan or Krista, any additional comments on that?
Yeah, there can be some situations where, and most of it comes back into where there wasn't good communication between maybe the tenant and the landowner. That's where have ran into some issues before, and just have to make sure that both parties understand what's going on out there. We had a situation this spring where landowner was cashiering the farm and saw a bunch of flags out in the field where we'd marked off our treatments and stuff. And then there was some university personnel out there working, and they stopped and wanted to know what was going on their farm. And there was some miscommunication at that point. And then I got a call from the tenant, and then we got everything was fine in the end, but it was just a matter of the communication piece wasn't in there ahead of time with the landowner. So I guess that's why I'm kind of a stickler on that.
Yeah, I 100% agree with that. That kind of keeps everybody on the same page for sure. I think one of a kind of a unique challenge, and that our team had to deal with it, and then many other at the time too, was when the government shut down. I think I can't remember if it was 2012 or 2013 when that happened. And that's right when we were starting our constructed wetland project using CP39, which is Farmable Wetlands Program, and that was very new at the time. So there was still a lot of confusion around on the FSA side and NRCS side, and then you know, how just the paperwork and engineering, all these. So there's a lot of moving parts. And then the financial piece of that is huge, because, you know, wetlands are great practice, but they are expensive to build. And so, at least these types of wetlands. So having those, you know, having those payments out there and not getting that reimbursement in a timely manner was something we really had to work closely with everybody. In our case, McLean County office. So it worked out okay in the end, because you know, we had partners in Nature Conservancy to kind of buffer some of that financial troubling time, but having the farm bill, or sorry, the government shut down and no one able to work in that sector was a challenge at that point, because that momentum needs to keep going, and everybody just had to put the brakes on at that point. So that was a challenge, but we were able to work around it, thankfully.
One other comment I'd make is picking the right cooperator too. You want somebody that's got an interest in what you're wanting to put on his farm, as far as whatever your research is, but also somebody that's got a lot of patience, because you're in the middle of his operation and you're interrupting his normal flow of planting, harvesting, and everything he does. So the cooperator has to have some patience when it comes to working with you, because some of that doesn't happen really fast. When it comes to, when they call and say they're ready to do something, I try to be in that field, but sometimes I'm in another field, and, you know, it might be a half a day or something before I can get over to their farm. So it's choosing that right cooperator, and I just pretty much say it's you know, the payment we give to farmers for an N-rate trial, for any of the other stuff we do, we call a nuisance payment, because, you know, it's a nuisance in their operation. But if it's the right cooperator that enjoys doing that kind of work, it makes it really easy, and it flows really good.
Yep, yep. That all makes sense. Yeah, we use the term farmer bothering at times, and yeah, I think we find these folks have a lot of things on their plate, and so we try to do as little farmer bothering as we possibly can, but it's necessary to move the whole space forward in order to try new things. And so very much relate to that comment, Dan. To maybe shift and think about sort of things you see that you'd like to see happening or done that maybe aren't currently done. Yeah, what kind of particular projects or interests do you guys have that you want to pursue that you feel maybe isn't being done right now? Let's see. Becky, you're off mute. I'm going to pick on you first.
It's hard to pick like a specific project. I think it's just more trying to get everybody on board to do some of the projects or practices that are already out there. You know, I drive by a certain field every day on my way to work that I'm like, if I could just get them not to till in the fall, you know, little things like that. I think it's just more trying to get everybody on board with the things that we already know that work. And some of these farmers, for whatever reason, are very resistant to that. I don't know if it's because some of them it's tradition, some of them it's time or money, but just getting them on board with, like I said, the practices and the projects we know that work.
That makes sense. Yeah. Yeah. Any additional thoughts there, Dan? I see you come off mute.
Yeah, and that fall tillage is an issue. And the high-speed planters have brought about high-speed tillage with the not necessarily the vertical tillage disc, but the other high-speed tillage that's going on. And we pulverize bean stubble in the fall, and then we come back and we pulverize it again in the spring, and now we're getting dust storms and things like that. I don't know how. The research shows that, you know, soil loss contributes to soil degradation, and Dr. Margonaut has, you know, proof of that from this archived soil samples he's had, and the soil samples have been taken around the state, and we've degraded, you know, drummer is no longer drummer. It's something degraded. It's from a 6% organic matter. Now it's somewhere in the neighborhood of probably 3 to 3.5%. So those are some of the changes that I've seen, and cover crops certainly aid in soil loss, and plus have the benefit of besides holding the soil, but also taking up nitrates that might be in the soil. We keep preventing from leaching into the tile.
Go ahead, Krista.
Yeah, I mostly want to just second what Becky said. It'd be nice to see Illinois as a whole incorporate more conservation practices. Anytime we go to conferences, I can see that we kind of lag on many things compared to some of our neighbors. So yeah, I'm not quite sure why that. There's a multiple of factors that relay into that. I know, and so that would be neat. But on kind of like the innovation side, I'm curious that there's some really amazing things that are coming out with technology regarding like I don't know why I just heard about it, but cover crop seeding with drones I think has a lot of potential. Just hearing about that this year, that's kind of neat. And then other more edge of field practices, but in ways that make sense. Not like what really works for producers, the owners, but also seeing more of the bundling of like what can we do in field and what can we do edge of field to really help keep our nutrients where they are. I think that'd be a good direction to move as well.
Yeah, certainly agree with that. We'll shift on to something that you kind of hit on, Becky, but maybe we can have everybody kind of expand on this a little bit. In terms of the work you all do, and then who you're trying to get this out to, and how you go about that, and do you feel you're reaching the intended audience that you have, or are there ways that you feel like could benefit maybe from partnerships to have a better reach to that intended audience? Maybe just tell us kind of who that is, and historically what kind of audience you feel like you've had, and then how we could maybe work towards reaching more of those kind of folks. Becky, I'll pick on you again since you're off mute.
I just haven't put it on mute because I'm in the office by myself right now. Like I said, we struggle with trying to get the best way to get information out. And we do so many different types of events during the year. We also do have a very big, here in Livingston County, we have a very big education component with one of my coworkers. She's our ag in the classroom coordinator, so she does a lot of education type stuff. So even for her to get information out to teachers is sometimes hard. So yeah, for us, just finding the best way, and also finding ways that are economically feasible, because anybody who's been around SWCDs knows our funding has been very low the last couple of years. So we have to be very judicious on where we're spending the money. So we haven't come up with a good way to get information out.
Sure. Krista, yeah, go ahead.
Just to chime, again, like my experience has been with a pretty small group, so it was easier in a way just because we kind of knew the people we'd be working with. But traditionally we have partnered with McLean County Soil and Water District to get information out through their email list, or we were making flyers to send out to people through there, which was good. But it just seems like nothing really works better than that direct one-on-one when you can. But that's hard when you're dealing with hundreds, if not thousands, of people in a county too. But it just seems like now maybe more impactful is just leaning into more social media, where that's like a Facebook or YouTube video can be more impactful in 2 minutes than maybe, reading an article in a magazine. I don't know, but it just seems like if someone's got 2 minutes, they might watch a video on it versus maybe reading something. So I think it's a challenge for all of us to kind of switch to communicating more in that space in some ways. Watching a video on a conservation practice or something, it feels like can be an avenue to pursue a little more in the future, but open to suggestions on that.
Yeah, that makes sense. I'll go ahead, Dan.
The research that I'm involved in is through NREC, and so Julie and those folks, get the information from the research papers, and as the research goes through, and every year there's a yearly, on the website is a report for what the research looked like for the year, and that kind of stuff's out there from our side of things. And then IFCA hosts with TFI a 4-hour field day, which is coming up September 4th at Eric Miller's farm again this year. And, we try to get the information out that way. At our convention in January, IFCA convention, we'll have the researchers come in there and talk to the retailers. A lot of the salespeople are there and talk to them about the work that's been done throughout the course of the year.
Field days. How do you get people to show up? We have have had varying experience or outcomes, let's say, getting people to show up for field days. I guess any tips or thoughts or advice there? And do you typically, do you feel like you're getting at those field days? Is it mostly the tenants? Is it landowners, other conservation professionals? I feel like that's the gamut we tend to see. Thoughts and feelings on field days and how you've had successful field days.
It's tough. I don't know I don't know what you can do. We've got that research farm there around Hammond. We got a lot of good farmers around there, and very seldom do we see very many of those show up. It's mostly the folks like you guys that come to those meetings, and we do quite a bit of work to put those on, and we generally have a large crowd at that one. And but it's a low mix of farmers. Out of 100 people, there might be 25 farmers that are there, and a lot of those guys are the ones that are already doing some of the practices. They just want to take a look and see if there's something new that we've been trying, or see what the research is showing.
So I would say for us, field day, I've noticed field day numbers going down the longer I've been here. I just feel like, and the ones that are there are usually, you feel like you're preaching to the choir, I guess you would say, because they're the ones that are already doing it. Like we actually I've started doing smaller group meetings to where I try to get a farmer to host it like in their tool shed or something like that, trying to get about 20 to 30 people there. And those seem to be working better than trying to do a big like countywide field day. We actually have one coming up next week. I went away from the farmer and I'm working with the bank in Flanagan and doing it on drone demonstrations and different ways to use drones, not just for cover crop seeding, but also crop scouting and chemical and fertilizer application, just to try and show something different. But we found those to be a little more effective than trying to do the big one, because you can get 20 people in a tool shed, and we usually tell whoever's hosting it, invite your neighbors. They'll come more if that farmer has invited them than if I invite them. And so then usually we have a pretty good ratio of farmer to agency, I guess you would say. So like I said, we've just found that those smaller, more intimate, I guess you'd say, gatherings have been working better than a large field day type of event.
Anything to add, Krista?
Yeah, not much. I think Becky and Dan definitely explained the same experience we've had over the years. We've partnered with the Franklin family in Lexington for over 15 years now, and we've had a couple of larger open houses there back in 2009 and then 2012. Those are pretty well attended, but then we ended up canceling our 2015 because we didn't hardly get any RSVPs. So it's like the trend is definitely going that way, and I think some of it is just saturation. There's a lot of these out there, and on the conservation professionals, and I think there was there's a lot, if you had a grant, oftentimes that was part of deliverables. You needed to do a field day of some kind. So it was kind of like even if you felt like you weren't going to get the attendance, you kind of had to do it anyway. So I think exactly kind of what Becky said, smaller groups seem to work better. A direct invite from the farmer themselves seems to be much, much better. But also partnering, like if there's a way that 3 or 4 organizations can come together on the same field day, I think that's really the way to go, because oftentimes you have the same objectives anyway, and it's a way to share the research or the new ideas with multiple different organizations. Those seem to be a little more successful as well.
Sure. Appreciate all those answers. We will now turn it over to some questions from the audience in the chat. I think I will direct this one to Dan to start with. Just kind of commenting on the, at times turnover, as Becky mentioned, within an RCS or the federal side. Comment is some folks have a better consistent relationship with their folks they purchase inputs from. What do you feel like the role is with private partnership and companies that already have maybe farmer trust, and how we facilitate these conversations of conservation? I know that can be a tricky thing at times, but maybe Dan, with where you sit in the organization you're with, how do you navigate that?
As far as you're talking about the relationship between a farmer and his fertilizer person making recommendations, is that what the question is?
Yeah, what does that potential partnership look like between a farmer, maybe the ag retailer, having that trust, and then moving that into potential conservation conversations?
I think the longer the fertilizer retailer has been in the area and there's been a continuity, it's just kind of like every other organization. If you got continuity in the people that are there, that's where the trust arises from. I spent 31 years working out of the same office and gained the trust of those customers. But you can also burn your trust in by making a bad recommendation, especially with some of the, I'm gonna call them snake oils that come onto the market every now and then. The retailers got to be careful what he proposes to a customer, and you don't want to waste any of the customer's money. And I think there's been quite a bit of training with cover crops now through the retail. And I'll mention one company, Align IFS, here in Champaign County, and of course there are multiple counties. They've put on a third drill now to do fall covers, and they're drilling in cover crops, and they've increased the acres in East Central Illinois by quite a bit by doing that. And they found a way to lease drills and buy the cover crop seed and contract with farmers. And farmers like that. They like to be able to call somebody up and say, hey, let's get the cover crop sowed, and they don't have to worry about it. It's one project that's out of their way. So that's something that Illini has been doing. I'm involved in the Black Slough project over in the Philo area, and AFT in San County came up with a unique perspective on that, where actually subsidize the seeding of cover crops, and that's taken off pretty well too. And that's being done by a retailer to facilitate the seeding. So I go back to, you've got older salespeople in some of those positions, and they've got the trust, and we've got to get them to trust the process when it comes to soil conservation, especially with cover crops, and also talking about how do we do less tillage on the soil.
Yeah, fully agree there. Yeah, very aware of the work Illini IFS is doing, and we try to partner with them as well to connect them to farmers who are interested in utilizing their service, especially knowing like it definitely helps maybe get past that labor bottleneck with planting covers in the fall, at the same time as harvest. Obviously that's not a free service, so there's always the thing of how do we get, maybe connect those farmers with financial assistance to cover the cost of that service with Line AFS. But really a fan of what they're doing, and I hope others can sort of look at that model and maybe try to expand some of that as well.
I think they have. There's different ways of doing that. I know other retailers in the area are running airflow spreaders and seeding along with, they'll sometimes use potash with cereal rye going out in corn stalks. That works really good. And then run a light disc over that and we've done that before too in some of our research, and you can get a really good cover crop going. So there's all different ways of doing it, but I do see an increase in cover crop acres because of the retailer taking a stand that his people are now able to understand how to get them on the ground. And maybe as it becomes part of the business and there's some profitability in that, I think you start getting that recommendation out there a little bit more.
Yeah. Yeah, all that makes sense. Moving on to another question. Do you guys work with any farmer-led groups in Illinois, similar to some of the ones that have spawned up in like Iowa and Indiana? Seems like those organizations have been effective in those other states. I know, Becky, Soil and Waters often have farmer boards that help govern the local efforts in those counties. I guess thoughts on that. I mean, in some ways, we are that in terms of PCM being somewhat of a farmer-led or led by a farmer-run organization. Rachel put in the chat, American Farmland Trust is now trying to spin up these farmer-led watershed groups through their Flash program. But any others you guys want to highlight and talk about there?
Yeah, I'll go ahead and start with that. So here in Livingston County, we do have our local work group that we do every year with both farmers and other ag professionals, or even just we invite, city council members and things like that, just to get everybody's input on what we think our resource concerns are. But also the American Farmland Trust and their flash groups, our Vermilion Headwaters Watershed Project is one of those flash groups. So we have one of those here in our county. We've actually had that steering committee. It evolved from the Indian Creek Watershed Project, which was ending as I started, now into the Vermilion Headwaters Watershed Project. So we've had a steering committee here for probably about 15 years in that part of the county. So we've had a farmer-led group for many years here. And I think it ebbs and flows. Sometimes we get a lot of people interested in working with it, and then they get burnt out and it kind of ebbs back until we can get a new set of people in. So it is very helpful, especially when you're working with, like I said, for me, that's the part of the county that's the complete opposite corner. So that's a good liaison between me and some of the other farmers there, is I can go to that farmer-led group, or somebody from that farmer-led group can be with me when I go to talk to somebody that I maybe haven't met before.
Sure. Very helpful. Just a couple minutes before we turn it back to Rachel, I guess, any kind of just final parting thoughts on this whole conversation today from any of you that you think we can summarize in a minute or two? Krista, go ahead, Becky.
I just think for us here, it's just being transparent and also being yourself. Don't try and come off as an expert if you're not. Just be true to yourself and talk to them like they're regular people. Don't talk down to them, or don't look at them as if they're some Superman that you're not, because it's not something that you do. Just be yourself and talk to them and get to know them is the main thing. That the main way you can do things is make that connection.
Go ahead, Krista.
Yeah, no, that was excellent, Becky. And the only thing I'll add to that is just I've been so grateful for that experience of exchange learning between landowners and farmers and bank owners, because I'm from a rural area, but my family didn't farm. So I've learned so much just about the day-to-day of what's happening and their concerns, and then how conservation fits into that. And sometimes it doesn't. And so it's also learning just the little things that work with everybody, but just becoming friends and earning that trust, and just the little things of just checking in every now and then, even if it's not about the research or the projects. It's just checking in to see how everybody's doing, and you kind of become integrated in their families in a way, which has been really special to me. So yeah, just keeping that humanity piece, I think, is really important.
my perspective is, I wish everybody could keep an open mind on what we're talking about when it comes to cover crops and fall anhydrous. If you go back to 2011, Dr. Mark David and I got in a big heated discussion about fall nitrogen and cover crops. And by the time I got to 2015, 2016, I actually saw the research that was going on. I understood then the impact we could make from cover crops and also moving fall nitrogen to spring. And we could actually, we can show through the on-farm research that's been done by NREC that we could hit our 45% reduction quickly if we would just adopt those two practices. And that's what the Black Slough project is at Philo, is taking a embedded watershed and showing that an on-farm tile reduction can come across in a watershed too. And that's what that project is.
Yeah.
Open mind, keep an open mind.
Yep. I agree. I think, yeah, Becky, you hit on it and everybody hit on it. Just authenticity goes a really long way. And in fact, and we don't necessarily have to have the new flashiest thing all the time. I think, you know, consistent strides in things that we know work does go a really long way. With that, I think awesome. Thank you all for the participation in this discussion. I think some really helpful insights from different perspectives there. With that, we will turn it back to Rachel for some final things with the program, and we'll wrap for today.
Thank you, Greg. Thanks to our panelists so much for that discussion and yeah, sharing all of your expertise with us. So as we're close, we're wrapping up our summer series on networks of support and talking about you know, just how it is to work with landowners, with farmers, and a whole variety of folks on the land. So with that, we are still continuing our campaign for the conservation story map here at ISAP. And over these next months, we're growing our conservation story map, especially to highlight the voices of women farmers, ag advisors, conservation professionals, and the like, just to keep building a stronger network. So if there are any women on the call who aren't on the story map, please add your pin. We're really looking to build out our map so much more. And the story map just allows folks to connect with conservation-minded people around Illinois, helps you find demonstration farms. You can do so many things with all of the filters on the story map. So if you have women in your network that you know of that should be on the map, you can also pass this link along to them here at the bottom of the slide. So please keep help us building out our conservation story map for ISAP. And with that, you can also join our network on LinkedIn. You can follow us on Meta. You can also watch hours and hours of learning on YouTube if you just want to keep the playlist running and learn about all the things that we do here at ICON. And you can sign up to receive our newsletter where you'll hear about all the different things happening across the partnership, different job listings, different events, and that sort of thing. And just for some news that's happening around our network here at ISAP, you are all invited to the Conservation Cheers at Farm Progress Show, hosted and co-hosted by the SWCS chapter of Land of Lincoln. Sorry, kind of a mouthful. Thanks, Krista. But ISAP is putting together this Conservation Cheers happy hour where you can get together with a bunch of other conservation folks at Farm Progress Show. That'll be in the Partners for Conservation tent on Wednesday, August 27th. Farm Progress Show runs from August 26th to the 28th in Decatur. I also wanted to just plug a little bit. There's some more nutrient stewardship field days from Farm Bureau, so please check out their website. And I'll also just link our events website in the chat, which is where you can find all of the details for these events. Savannah Institute is once again hosting their Twilight Tailgate with the Trees on August 28th. And then, although it's a little ways away, but early bird registration is closing for the 2025 workshop for watershed leaders in November. So be sure to register for that and get your early bird rate in before they close. And so up next, as I mentioned in the beginning, we're just keep expanding how we talk about on-farm conservation. So next month, we'll be hearing from Savannah Institute about integrating trees, crops, and how that all correlates to the nutrient loss reduction strategy here in Illinois. So that will be on September 10th. And I almost forgot that we have a closing poll. So if you'll just stick with me for one more minute and take our closing poll. And if you have or need CEUs, there is your QR code before we wrap up. So thank you all. And if you all ever have any topic ideas or things that you would like to see us cover, things that are on the top of your mind, you can always send that over to us. All of our contact info and things like that is linked right on our website. Or you can, reach out to me directly at rlechuga@farmland.org. And I'm happy to listen to any of your ideas and your thoughts. And thank you all for taking the exit poll. And that concludes our August call for icons. So thanks for joining us. I hope you all have a lovely rest of your August, and we will see you back here in September. Bye, everyone.
Thank you all very much.
Thanks all. Thank you, Rachel.